Morning, everybody. So first of all, thank you for the invite to come along and talk to you about Addysg Man Club today. Some of you may have heard of Addysg Man Club before. Some of you maybe have seen bits of it on social media, maybe have a little bit of an understanding of the work that it is that we do. But I'm also certain there's likely to be people here who don't know who we are, they don't know what we do, and they certainly don't know why we do it. Now, the why, as far as Addysg Man Club is concerned, has and will always be central to absolutely everything that we'll ever do. So to help highlight why we exist, I'd like to start today by showing you a quick video.
When I first approached Elaine, it was about finding that one man. Just getting one man to stop one of the family going through what we'd been through. Hi, my name's Luke Ambler. I'm the co-founder of Addysg Man Club, a talking group for men.
He were a cheeky chappy, typical lad's lad, tough as nails, but I think probably had a soft centre. Andrew died early hours of the Tuesday, 5th of April, and the weekend prior to that, he'd had an enormous falling out with his partner. And I just think he got himself into a really dark place that he couldn't get out of. And that's the sad thing. We just think he'd have talked to anybody to have snapped him out of it, told him what he were thinking were rubbish, he would still have been here today.
4 days after my brother-in-law, Andrew, died, I approached my partner and asked her about sex. Where we could get guys just like Andy, myself, talking. 3 months after, I approached my mother-in-law, Elaine, at a wedding, family wedding, and asked if we could set up this idea where men could just meet up and chat. And together we came up with this concept, Addysg Man Club, a simple idea where men, like myself, like any bloke, normal bloke, could just meet and talk. You'll have that anxiety, that nervousness, that fear of judgment, but there's none of that when you come through the door at Addysg Man Club. It's a tea, a coffee, you sit down, a ball gets passed around, you have a chat, and you'll be amazed at what it can do for you, just letting some of that out. More than that now, and we've been on a bus tour, we've met the Royals, we've had letters off Theresa May, you know, Lad Bible, all these cool stuff. Leeds United this week playing against Huddersfield Town wearing the shirts, you know, just reaching the exact demographic that we try to reach. And it's just about finding guys just like Andy, who maybe have got that mask on, who feel like they can't take it off, they're going to be embarrassed or they'll burden someone, just to be comfortable a bit to take that off. And that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud that we have 800 plus guys a week being able to take that mask off and open up and still get to go home with their families on a night.
What we need to do now is to get the whole world to realise that it is okay to talk.
It's okay to talk.
It is okay to talk.
So that's our why. I do apologise for half of that video being in mute. I forgot to unmute the video. I do apologise for that. But that's our why. As you could see there, Andy was a 23-year-old lad. Like so many other lads of his age, everybody from the outside looking in would just assume that he was a happy-go-lucky lad because he was still enjoying his weekends out with his mates. He was still playing football, all these different types of things. And then one day, without any sign, signal, or warning, Andy took his own life. Now, unfortunately, Andy's not on his own. In this country alone, there's over 4,500 men take their own lives every single year. That's when you start to boil those figures down that it becomes alarming to me, because that equates to 12 men every day. That's one man every 2 hours. And when you read that suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50, it shows the size of the problem that we're dealing with. What intensifies that problem for me is the fact that that's not talked about. You know, you can open up the newspaper or turn on the TV news and there's a story about risk factors for men everywhere you look. And that's fantastic. It's great to see. But not very often does it touch on this. Yet this is the size of the problem and how many people are being affected by it. There's still a stigma and an awkwardness for people to talk about the subject of suicide. And that's one of the things, in my opinion, that stops people talking about the things that lead up to it. And that's one of the things that Addysg Man Club hopes to change. Luke, that you saw in the video there, is Andy's brother-in-law. Now, being Andy's brother-in-law, Luke took a lot of the responsibility for the things that needed to happen after Andy had died upon himself. For example, he was the one that went and collected Andy's car from where he left it. He was the one that was breaking the news of Andy's death to members of the family, basically watching them crumble in front of him. He was of the opinion, as you heard there, that if Andy had somewhere to go, where he could talk, somewhere that was free from judgment of both the person that he was and of the things that he was saying, somewhere where that stigma where men are perceived as a burden or a weakness for talking about their issues, if all of that was stripped back, if that place existed, there's a chance that Andy might still be here. So that's what he set about to try and achieve by starting up a coffee club for men. Now that sounds like a massively simple solution to what we know to be a huge complex issue. As we know, simple solutions are very often the most effective. But also, as we know, because we're British, we try and solve every problem by putting the kettle on. Now, this happened in Halifax in West Yorkshire. And Halifax as a place is populated by the sort of mind that are very comfortable to either stick the chin up and chest out and internalise every problem and feeling they've ever had, or to push it as far away from them as they possibly can do. From one post that went out on Facebook to say that Andy's Man Club was happening, 9 men turned up. Now, for 9 men to turn up to something like Andy's Man Club in a place like Halifax showed that there was a clear need for those sessions to exist. A few weeks after the start of the sessions, Luke had seen things like the Ice Bucket Challenge and the Press Up Challenge happen on social media and thought that even though it's got quite a bad reputation for the effects it can have, especially as far as mental health is concerned, it can also be quite a positive and powerful tool just to spread awareness and make people aware that this is the impact that this sort of subject is having. So he decided to start his own campaign. The idea behind the campaign is to use that very picture that you can see on your screen there now, telling men that it's okay to talk. Don't worry about being perceived as a weakness, a burden, or an embarrassment. Very much the idea that talking takes that much strength. It's a very strong thing to do. Also, the idea that we'd much rather listen to you talk about your problems and your issues for however long that takes, rather than sit and listen to your eulogy for 20 minutes. Now, the way the campaign would work is that we'd emulate those ones we'd already talked about, in that people would take their own selfie, attach a screenshot of the statistics, and then they'd share and nominate 5 friends, and they'd share and nominate 5 friends, and so on and so on. There's a couple of interesting things about that. The first one being that as Luke took that picture there, he was sat next to his Mrs. Lisa, and he turned around to Lisa and says, "What do you think? Do you think this will work? Do you think it's a good idea?" And she said to him, "It's much more likely to work if you use somebody else on the selfie because you're a right ugly sod." Now, I disagree with Lisa. I'm not saying that because I find Luke dashingly handsome. I'm saying it because I know how many Instagram filters he put on that picture. If any of you ever meet Luke, he'll talk you through what all 15 of those Instagram filters did and how to hold the camera so you don't get your double chinning shot and everything. The other interesting thing about it is you've probably already read, it's now been recognised as the biggest mental health campaign on the planet. Over 100 million people took part in that. And it's still ongoing to this day, 6 years down the line, which again shows that need for it to happen. What's interesting about that, though, is that 24 hours after Luke sharing that picture, because of those stigmas and social attitudes we've already talked about, it hadn't got much traction at all. Very, very few people had shared that. Now, that's even more baffling when you think that this is on social media. You know, think to the last time you scrolled through a social media platform and some of the controversial and out there things that people are far too comfortable to talk about, but they were too uncomfortable to talk about male suicide. That tells you absolutely everything about why that campaign needed to happen. But as I say, Andy's Man Club's a sort of organisation that we'd rather focus on a solution than an issue. So Luke thought to himself, the first thing that I'll do is I'll text my dad. You know, he's a positive male role model to me. It'll make me feel as though somebody's joined in. And Luke at the time was also a professional rugby league player. So that meant that he got a couple of his teammates involved, and then the supporters started to get involved, and it started to snowball from there. And it snowballed so much so that by the end of the first week, we'd had a massive result, and Ricky Gervais had got involved. Now, I don't claim for 1 minute that Ricky Gervais has any knowledge or understanding of what Andy's Man Club does, but hopefully by him getting involved in that campaign means that somebody else out there does. The fact that he normally only ever tweets about pulling funny faces in the bath or his cats as well probably means that that's got more traction as a result of that. Been brilliant as well to then see him go and normalise the conversation around suicide with the series Afterlife. I'm not claiming Andy's Man Club has had anything to do with Afterlife either, by the way. I'd love to be able to, but just the fact that that sort of subject matter has been brought into the living rooms of people on a daily basis in such a challenging way as well. You know, anybody that's seen that series, I'm sure you'll agree. 1 minute he's laugh out loud funny. The next minute he's sat open mouth with shock because he's dropped a C-bomb onto a child in a playground. To the next minute you're crying with the emotion of it all. As I say, for that sort of subject matter to be brought into the living rooms of people on a daily basis can only be positive in my eyes. We've then had some support from the world of sport. We've got the likes there of Anthony Joshua and Josh Warrington. Obviously, both title winning boxers in sort of arenas. The fact that these guys have got involved with this campaign hopefully breaks down those barriers to other people that operate in those sort of arenas, that these men that are perceived to have stigmas and make some of those guys realise that it's okay for them to speak. We then had some support from other areas of sport. You know, got the likes there of Leeds United wearing Andy's Man Club warm-up t-shirts. We've had the front cover of matchday programmes at teams like Huddersfield Town. We've got advertising boards around the side of professional pictures, all the way to local level clubs wearing our logos on the front of their shirts. Now, this goes a huge, huge way to helping us challenge those stigmas within one specific demographic of men. Those sort of men who maybe feel as though the only outlet that they have is sport, you know, that might be participating, that might be spectating. The fact that those guys might be not in a great headspace and have made their way down to that game that weekend Seeing the front cover of that programme, for example, and seeing that their club that they support with all of their emotion and everything else that they invest into it is telling them that they believe that it's okay to talk, that can hopefully normalise how they're feeling and maybe prompt them to go out and reach some support. The thing that we're not saying with this slide, however, is that you have to be a sporty and outgoing type of guy to come along to an Andy's Man Club. Quite the opposite. We have every single walk of life walk through the doors of our club, from every single race, religion, colour, creed, sexual orientation, social economic background, disabilities, talking about every single type of problem you could ever imagine a fella having. There's an example I always use on this one. It's of two guys that attend our club down in Halifax. One of those guys very much falls into the demographic of Ben that you can see on your screen right now, in that he's a huge football fan and he's in a different English city supporting his team every single weekend. Now, one of his closest friends is a guy that he met through Andy's Man Club, and this guy has the hobby of jewellery making. If these two guys had met at school, they'd been tearing strips off each other and probably wouldn't have got on, probably not been close throughout life because of their different interests. Because they've met in an Andy's Man Club and sat opposite each other, talking about the darkest things that have ever happened to them, the darkest things that have ever come across their mind, those guys support each other in so many different ways, and their family spent last Christmas together. That just goes to show the sort of support that's on offer through something like Andy's Man Club and the relationships that can develop. Ultimately, though, these are the people that we hope that benefit from Andy's Man Club. Now, we want these guys to benefit in a number of ways. The first one being that Andy's Man Club is quite unique in what we've set about to try and achieve. There isn't many organisations that are out there today that have set themselves up with the focus of wiping themselves out. We don't want to have to exist. We want to challenge those stigmas to such a degree that people feel comfortable talking in all areas of their life, whether or not that's at work, in the pub, at the game, wherever it might be. So it's socially acceptable to talk anywhere and everywhere about the things that happen in your life, that maybe by the time these guys are old enough, we can operate in a different guise. We don't have to be there for people to be able to talk to each other because it's acceptable for them to do so. Not only am I proud to say that I do this work day to day with my work with Andy's Man Club, but also at home, because the young man that you can see on the bottom left of your screen there is actually my son. He's brought up in a very different environment to the one that I got brought up in. Through no fault of the people around me, it was very much society's way that boys don't cry and, you know, you put your emotions in that box and you tuck them away and you don't open it as often as you can. I was actively rewarded. If I fell over in the street and grazed my knee, I got a bag of sweets if I didn't cry. You know, it was like I said, put your emotions in that box and don't open that box. Not only is he encouraged to show his emotions, but he's also encouraged to develop an emotional language to allow him to speak about those emotions. And that's something that I'm very, very proud of. The other way that we hope that these guys benefit is from the adults in their lives, finding out about Andy's Man Club now, coming along, being supported, hopefully turning them into happier people as a result, which can in turn make these guys' lives happier. Without putting too much of a fine point on it, we want to make sure that these guys aren't touched by the pain left behind by suicide. Unfortunately, the young man that you can see in the middle there in the denim jacket hasn't been that fortunate. That's Alfie, Luke's son, Andy's nephew. Luke says that Andy was Alfie's favourite person in the entire world. And when they had to break the news to him that he'd died, the screech that he let out, not only did it put the windows through, but it shattered Luke's heart into a million pieces. The pain left behind by suicide is like nothing else. There's always those questions that remain that can never be answered. The main one, of course, being why. If we can reach out to more and more guys that will feel the way that Andy felt, hopefully have less lads in the situation that Alfie's in, less brother-in-laws in the situation that Luke's in, and less mums in the situation that Elaine's in. Now, speaking of Luke and Elaine, we're just going to hear from him again now in a video, talking about the journey that Andy's Man Club has been on over the last few years.
Starting a group or a club called Addysg Man Club, and the reason I came up with it because I've been passionate about mental health for a long time. 3 months ago, my brother-in-law died by suicide, and I want to do something where I could personally contribute and make a group and go and help other men, come up with a plan where guys could come together and talk. And if it ends up being like tonight's the first night, so you know I'm quite nervous about tonight and who turns up, but the outreach that I've received has been unbelievable, and it's so rewarding now looking at what we've done and why we've set it up along with Andy's mum. We've got a purpose behind it, which is mental health and Andy, and that his name can live on and create a legacy and helping. And if we can move this to Bradford and Leeds and so on, and other people get involved and they want to set up an Addysg Man Club in Nottingham or up in Scotland, that'd be ideal.
Man Club.
Andy's Man Club.
Andy's Man Club.
Andy's Man Club.
We're here at Albert Prom. Significant for two reasons for me. One, we're just above where Andy died by suicide. And two, we're just above the Tower House where I approached you 5 years ago and said, can we start Andy Roberts Coffee Club, which no one will have heard of because you accepted the idea but declined the name. And then we both went away, didn't we? And you'd thought of Andy's an acronym, and I'd thought of this thing, Man Club, and together we created the beast that is now well known as Andy's Man Club. How did you feel heading there that first night?
Excited, actually. I remember going to Morrison's to buy tea, coffee and sugar, and like you said to me, there'll only be us turn up, there won't be anyone there, and I says I can put up with you for an hour. And I were actually amazed that 9 guys walked through the door.
And all opened up.
And accepted me being there.
Yeah.
So what's your biggest few highlights been over the last 5 years?
The overall journey, like, I won't change anything from putting that first post out to doing that Sky Sports interview to having no idea how many guys would come, to 9 guys turning up, to then 15 guys turning up. It just completely exploded to the next minute being down doing stuff with Samaritans, Professor Green, Prince Charles, Prince Harry, letters off Theresa May, the Queen's Award, Uni Lad Bible, shortlist, like the list goes on.
Just took over, didn't it?
Yeah, there was nothing else.
No, there wasn't. I breathed, slept, ate, drank, Andy's Man Club. Everyone that goes to their own group says it's a brotherhood that they've got. It's like having a second family.
I know a lot of men that have struggled generally, especially in the UK. I think not enough men talk about the problems.
The first step towards helping myself was joining Andy's Man Club.
The only time I first spoke about my problems was when I first went to Andy's Man Club.
I first sought help through Andy's Man Club.
It's saved my life, really.
One of the things that I still find that's been the most powerful thing is that very first night we all got together for Lad Bible showing. We hired Shay, did it all up with balloons and everything, and we had no idea at that stage whether it was going to be just me and you again, or well, our families were going to go. And there were 300 to 400 people turned up, and that is the first time I realised how much work we were doing to help the families.
Yeah.
There were so many families there that had lost people. 2 different mums came up to me. Oh, it's got me again. 2 different mums came up to me and said, it's the first time I've ever been able to talk about it, because suicide is something you just never talk about, and if somebody asks how did your son die, but it is very difficult to say they died of suicide. And they were both in tears, and they just said it's the first time ever we've been able to talk. And it weren't until then that I realised what a massive impact we were having on the families.
So, 5-year-old today, happy birthday, Andy's Man Club. So that first night, we've walked in, 9 men have turned up, one of which, Oliver Vicks. What a journey that man's had.
And they just...
I had nowhere to go, nobody to talk to. I found myself in the pub most nights, just for some company, to go somewhere and be around other people. I soon realised that that wasn't a very productive way of dealing with my problems. It was about that time that I found Andy's Man Club. I actually attended the very first ever session of Addysg Man Club. From there, just that first night, opening up, talking to people about my problems, it really helps put things in perspective, knowing that A, it wasn't just me that was going through these things, but also it's okay to talk and it's okay to get things off your chest. After that first session, I felt like I'd had 12 cans of Red Bull. I honestly felt like I could have flown home that night. And I knew then that that was a feeling that I wanted to share with as many men as possible, provide this platform to as many men as possible. So we're here now today, opening our 50th club in Pontefract, and we set out with a goal 5 years ago of having 10 clubs in 5 years. So to have 50 clubs in 5 years, it's absolutely unreal.
The fact that you were the first guy, or one of the first guys to walk through the door, one of the first guys to speak, to then go on to be a facilitator of the biggest group at the time of Addysg Man Club in Halifax.
Well, he was really first facilitator, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then became one of our project development champions, and now heading up, starting new groups. He's just put the pin on the board for the 50th group over there in Pontefract, and to celebrate, he jumped out of a plane. So when people talk about that one man, it's not just a guy walked through a door and he's talked about his problems. Here's a guy who's walked through a door, talked about his problems, got himself back into his job, started seeing his son again, got his life right back on track, and now works for us, and he's jumping out of a plane celebrating up in there.
That's how Addysg Man Club grows, because once people are in better positions, they don't walk away, they want to give something back and know the next man that's going to walk through that door.
Yeah. But the biggest part for me that's made this journey so nice is the people. That's what's so special about Addysg Man Club. The people, the fact we're a registered charity now, and we have 8 amazing trustees, 7 fantastic staff, over 250 plus heroes, facilitators who open those doors every single Monday night to give guys that safe place to go and talk, to the thousands, the army of volunteers out there on the streets, raising awareness, backing us, supporting us, loving us, liking, sharing, commenting, every single thing that we do, because without the people at AMC is nothing, and they are the biggest asset that we've got, and we are indebted to each and every person that has ever supported us and continues to do so. If I could send any message out, it would be that other men or other people could set up a club, call it whatever you want, just get men talking and making it feel that it's okay. Get rid of this stigmatism that it's a problem, and let's squash it together, and hopefully, there could be some lives saved for this.
So as I say, that's just a snapshot of the journey that Addysg Man Club have been over the last 5 years. The last few years that were released last year for our 5th anniversary. Just before we move on, I want to touch really briefly on Ollie's story there, because that's a story that's replicated through every single one of the clubs that we run nationwide. Not only are those clubs run by volunteers, but those volunteers are guys that at some point or another have needed the support that Addysg Man Club provided and have stepped through the doors as a group user. For a couple of reasons, that never fails to stagger me. The first one is that it shows the men out there that no matter what you're going through, no matter how bad you perceive your situation to be, that it can and it will get better. But talking can be a massive catalyst behind that. It also shows anybody out there thinking of coming along to Addysg Man Club for the first time that the guy that's opening the door for me and showing me into the room, not only does he have an understanding about how dark a place my mind can become, he also has an understanding of the courage and guts it takes to walk through the doors of something like Addysg Man Club, acknowledging that you need some help. That's been the difference, in my opinion, between so many guys actually making it through the doors and not. So what is Addysg Man Club then? We currently have 117 community clubs across England, Scotland and Wales. A full list of those is available through our website. Those sessions are open to any man aged 18 and over. So while we were born out of the tragedy that happened with Andy, men don't need to be suicidal to attend our sessions. They don't have to have a mental health condition. You might just be struggling with one particular thing in your life at that moment and don't feel as though you have any other outlet. Get along to one of those sessions. You might have nothing going on. You might just want to go along to somewhere that you feel will be beneficial. Come along. It's absolutely fine to get down to those sessions. The sessions happen every Monday night, 7 p.m, except for bank holidays. And the other unique thing about us is that there's no referral, there's no registration, there's no signing in, there's no cost. And a key part of it for me is the fact that there's no obligation to speak. So guys can walk through that door, grab a brew. You never know, one of the fellas might have been baking. There might be a lovely Victoria sponge or something knocking about. At the very least, there's going to be some biscuits. All of that's completely free. Talk if you want to, don't if you don't. That's huge. Again, we've got examples of this all over the country, but there's one that always jumps out to my mind of a guy that attends with Addysg Man Club now, that the first session he ever came along to, he had a pair of headphones in, and his anxiety was so high that he didn't feel comfortable taking those headphones off. So rather than challenge him and make the situation any harder for him than it already was, the facilitator just turned around and said, well, I'm not going to bother challenging. He's walked through the doors. That's a big enough step. He's not bothering anybody. The week after, that guy came through the doors in exactly the same situation. Now, having met him the previous week, the facilitator turned around to him on that occasion and said, do me a favour, mate, take them off for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the session so that if you do decide later on that you want to speak, because we've introduced the session, you have a knowledge and an understanding of how to go about doing so. He left his headphones off for maybe 15, 20 minutes that week, and then his anxiety spiked and he went back on again. Now, the week after that, that guy set himself a challenge, and he challenged himself to come along and not bring his headphones with him at all. Now, he still didn't speak, but he sat there and he listened to what every single guy was going through and how they were being supported by the rest of the group, so that when he came through the doors the following week, he didn't bring his headphones with him, and he spoke. And he spoke about all different many of challenges in his life. I mean, he'd been talked down off a bridge a couple of weeks previously, he'd then spent some time in residential care making sure that he was safe. All these other dreadful situations that were happening in his life. The trajectory that that guy's been on ever since has been a massively upward one. The first thing that never, ever, ever fails to blow me away is the fact that he's now the group facilitator of that group. If that doesn't show the power of talking and what talking and opening up about your issues can do for somebody, then I really don't know what does. He's also got a new job. He's in a new relationship. He's stepfather to a bunch of children. He's got a dog that he never shuts up about. All these other brilliant situations that are happening in his life that he says if he hadn't have come along to an Addysg Man Club, he wouldn't be here to enjoy them. I once asked him, what kept you coming through the doors? Because you can't have been getting too much out of the sessions when you were coming in and not even, listening, let alone speaking. And he says it was the fact that there was no pressure. I could literally just come in and say nothing, and there was no pieces of paper being forced under my nose and what outcome do you want and all these different types of things. And he says that that's the only reason why he's still walking the face of this earth today. And that's absolutely staggering. We now have over 2,300 men using our groups every single week. Now, we're not putting that out there to say, look at how phenomenal we are and aren't we great. The only reason we ever advertise that is to show those men out there that no matter how alone you feel, you're not alone. Because we have that many guys reaching out to us on a weekly basis. There's so many other guys out there that are dealing with stuff. You're not on your own. Reach out. There are people out there that are willing to listen. When you rewind 6 years and see that we had 9 guys coming through our doors, that's a massive, massive jump and shows that clear need for us to do the work that we're doing. What's another huge jump, though, is up to those 4,500 guys that are still taking that step every single year. That's why we always take opportunities like this to speak to as many people as we possibly can do, in the hope that one more man walks through the doors of one of the clubs that we run somewhere around the country this following week. We also have an online session available. That was born out of the pandemic. We had to think pretty quickly about ways that we could continue to support our men while we were able to meet face to face. What's brilliant about that for me, though, is the fact that even though all of our 100-odd face-to-face sessions are now back open, we now still have about 100, 120 guys jumping on those online sessions every single week. Now, that could be guys that have got such a social anxiety that they'd never make it along to one of our sessions face-to-face. It could be guys that have got a journey, of a couple of hours to make it along to an Addysg Man Club, who can now benefit from the comfort and safety of their own home. Confidentiality is a massive part of Addysg Man Club, so much so that what's said in the rooms of our sessions stays in those rooms, with no exceptions other than if we have a genuine concern for somebody's welfare. As a result of that confidentiality, we will never, ever publish those links anywhere. And anybody that's wanting any information on either the online session or any of our face-to-face sessions, all they need to do is drop us an email to info@addysgmanclub.co.uk, and that link will be sent out to them securely. So why is it me talking to you about Addysg Man Club this morning then? Well, I first walked through the doors of an Addysg Man Club around about 5.5 years ago. Found myself in a situation the previous Christmas where I was bowing to every single male stereotype imaginable. Not only was I bowing to those stereotypes, I had my head buried in the sand to such a degree that I didn't recognise the effect that was having on not just me, but also those people around me. Fortunately enough, though, my brother did. My brother ran me up one day and took me out for a walk. Now, myself and my brother, 2 guys in our mid to late 30s who talk every single day, but we always talk via text because you don't have to put any sort of emotion into a text. And because of the guys that we are and the things that we like, we normally find ourselves talking about women, football and music. Now, on that day, we started off the conversation by talking about losing our dad a few years previously. Now, we'd only ever had conversations about losing our dad to make funeral arrangements. We were the sort of guys that day after our dad's funeral, we were back at work cracking on because that's what guys do, etc., etc. We then went on to talk about the divorce that he was going through at that particular time. Again, I was trying to support my brother through that divorce. I think in the way that society had taught me to, which was, you see a guy with an issue, the way you get around that is you organise a lads' night out. From speaking to him on that day, I realised that he probably needed an additional outlet as well. We then went on to talk about a situation whereby a few years previously to that, myself and my wife had lost a child in pregnancy. Now, that was something I didn't even know how to talk about, let alone for my brother to talk to me about it. So up until that day, we'd never had a discussion on that matter ever. When I got to the end of that walk, there was two things that I started to feel. The first thing that I started to feel was a little bit of weight lift off me, because I'd finally started to open up and acknowledge some of these things in my life, and that had lifted a little bit of the weight of them. The other thing that I started to feel was that I no longer felt on my own. I think when you're a bloke and you're in these sort of situations and you have these sort of thoughts in your mind, because there's no other guys talking about this sort of thing in day-to-day life, you can think to yourself, I'm the only one that's thinking and feeling these things. At that time, thoughts of suicide had entered my consciousness. It wasn't something I had an active plan to do at that time, but it was something that was running through my mind as a what-if scenario. So to know that there was somebody else in my life that was going through his own sort of struggles actually came as a bit of a relief to me. Fast forward through another couple of months, and I'd very much reverted back to type. I'd closed off, I'd stopped talking, gone back to all those different stereotypes, and was resulting in an awful lot of anger coming out of me. Because I wasn't allowing any of my emotions, any other sort of outlet, the only way they were manifesting themselves was through anger. So I was flying off the handle at every single little thing. My brother rang me up one day and he says, "You're doing it again." I says, "I'm doing what again?" He says, "You've closed off, you're not talking, you're displaying an awful lot of anger. I think you should go and talk to somebody." Now, I tried to front that phone call up and turn around to my brother and said, "No, that walk and talk we've had sorted me out. I'm all good." Very much believing that it was okay to talk, but hoping that I'd probably only ever have to do it once. It was then that he turned around to me and says, "Well, I had a conversation with your missus the other day, and she's feeling very much the same, that, you could do with going and speaking to somebody." And that was the only excuse I needed to revert back to type and display anger. And rather than listening to the things that he was saying, I just flew off the handle and started to say to him, "Who the bloody hell do you think you are? Stop meddling in my life." And I called him a few other choice names, which I won't share with you guys today as well. Now, later that week, at that time, I was working as a teacher in a higher educational college. And ironically enough, I've already talked about Luke's rugby league background. I found myself stood on a rugby league pitch with a bunch of 18, 19-year-old lads, one of whom was possibly the nicest lad you'll ever wish to meet. This lad was everybody in the class's best mate. His work was always on time and neat. We were able to use him as a really solid example for the other kids of how to behave and all these other types of situations. It wasn't a suck up, but he was always laughing and joking and carrying on and, brought an awful lot of joy to that classroom. Now, this one day, this guy ran into this tackled this other lad around about head height. And as if that wasn't bad enough, as this lad was laid on the floor, he started shouting a steady stream of expletives towards him. And that was hugely out of character for this lad. But rather than have that awkward conversation with him, because I'm a bloke and he's a bloke, I just turned around and went, "Red card, I'll deal with you in a bit." A couple of minutes went past and I left a couple of my colleagues to deal with the young man who, fortunately enough, wasn't too badly injured on the floor, and started to make my way over to the dugout where this lad was sat. And as I'm doing so, I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? I'm going to have to give this lad both barrels here. I'm going to have to, give him one hell of a bollocking, because if I don't, the other kids will accuse me of favouritism. So I've got to, make a bit of an example of him. As I got over to the dugout, much to my surprise, I found him sat in floods of tears. Now, that took me back as well, because again, I'm a bloke, he's a bloke. I don't really know how to deal with other lads that are sat in floods of tears. But fortunately, the thing that made me do was change tact. And rather than unleash both barrels and tear his head off, I sat down and I spoke to him. And I said to him some of the things that I probably should have said to him about 15, 20 minutes earlier about, why all the anger and why, you're displaying a very much out of character behaviour, what's going on. And it probably took him about 20 or 25 minutes to get him to open up to me that the fact that the night before he made an attempt to take his own life. Now, that really did knock me for six, because that was the first time anybody had ever opened up to me about that sort of thing. It came as such a shock and a surprise. How often do you hear it within situations of suicide where everybody says he was such a lovely lad, he was always smiling? That was everything that was sat in front of me that day. We fortunately got that young man some help. He has been involved with Addysg Oedolion Cymru for a period of time, went on to graduate university not long ago as well, and has gone on to achieve some amazing things. But later that week, it started to dawn on me that the very same coping strategy that guy's using is every single coping strategy that I'm trying to use. Every time I leave the house in the morning, I put a mask on, trying to show the world that I'm happy, trying to show the world that, I'm the life and soul of every party. I'm laughing, joking, carrying on. But in actual fact, I was miserable. I was struggling. And it started to dawn on me that if he's taking himself down a road where he feels as though the only outlet he's got available left to him is to take his own life, if I carry on using the same strategies, I'm going to put myself in the very same situation. So it was at that moment I decided to walk through the doors of an Addysg Man Club. Now, the first three questions in an Addysg Man Club are always exactly the same. The first one of those questions is always, how's your week been? As somebody asked me that question that week, I was determined to not speak. I was going to join in with the sessions and talk, but I wasn't going to tell anybody the reasons that I was there. So the first thing that I did on that question was talk out my backside. I said, I've had a fantastic week, not a problem. Didn't mention the phone call with my brother. Didn't mention the situation with the young man at school. Very much treated that question as a greeting. You know, I'm guilty of doing it today where you walk past somebody in the street and go, morning, how are you doing? You all right? You don't stay to listen to see if they're all right, because that question has become a greeting. Now, question number 2 then came up. Question number 2, every single week is always, what's been one positive from your week? Now, I'd opened up to the missus at home at that point, told her I was going to go along to an Addysg Man Club, and that got a positive response from her, because she was the one that was having to put up with the behaviour that I was displaying. She couldn't have put up with too much more of that, as I'm, led to believe now. And if I'm of the opinion now that if I hadn't have found Addysg Man Club when I'd have found it, it's likely that my marriage wouldn't have survived. When I already told you earlier that thoughts of suicide had entered my consciousness, if you have to put on top of that divorce proceedings and access to my son, financial situation, where am I living, couple that with day-to-day situations, and, who knows where I'd have ended up had I not found an Addysg Man Club. Question number 3 then came up. Question number 3 for me personally is massive, because not only is it the question that unlocked me, but it's a question that I see unlock hundreds and hundreds of guys travelling in my role with Addysg Man Club as I do now. And it's a massively simple one. That question is there anything you need to get off your chest? Now, as that question was asked, I sat there and I thought to myself, well, this is everything that you've come through the door for. They've laid it on a plate for you. You've got no choice here. You're going to have to speak. So as that thought process was going through my mind, there was one guy in particular that was sat off over to my left. I think there were 13 other guys in that room that night, but this one lad started to talk about this dreadful situation that was happening in his life. So bad, in fact, that it was almost harrowing. All these really dreadful, difficult situations that were happening in his life. What would normally have happened to me in that sort of situation is that I would have got a little bit of an inferiority complex and start to think to myself, well, my problems aren't as big or as problematic as his, so I can't talk about what's happening to me. But fortunately, it made me go the other way. And it made me sit there and think, well, do you know what? If that guy can talk about what's happening in his life, and it's 10 times worse than anything that I'm going through, I can actually see it helping him as he's speaking, then surely I can talk about what's happening in my life. Now, that point was hammered home to me by the reaction that every single guy in that room that had spoken that night had got. They weren't judged, they weren't ridiculed, they weren't told to man up and grow a pair. The first thing that happened to any man in that room that spoke that night is that they were listened to. You can tell people it's okay to talk as much as you want, but if there's nobody there to listen, then there's absolutely no point. Every single one of those guys was listened to, they were supported, they were accepted, they were given a little bit of guidance here and there, so that when the ball landed in my hands on that question that night, I started off speaking. And I started off by talking about some of the things that I'd spoken about with my brother when we went out for a walk, because I'd already articulated them. It came quite easy to me because I'd already done that. I then went on to start talking about some of the other things that were happening in my life that I hadn't talked to anybody about before. And then, much to my surprise, there were things that I'd buried so deep inside of me that I hadn't planned on speaking to anybody about for the rest of my life that came falling out of me that night as well. When I passed that ball on after that question, the feeling that I got was euphoric. It changed my outlook in a second, from thinking that being the strong, silent type is manly and how men are supposed to live, to thinking, no, forget that. I've got to talk about what's happening in my life because this feels phenomenal. We then went on to the question 4 and 5. Question 4 and 5 change every single week. Some weeks are about setting yourself a particular focus or looking at a particular positive. Other weeks, they are there literally to have a laugh and a joke with. And I think that can surprise people when we talk about that within Addysg Man Club, because I think that we think that because we're talking about the things that we're talking about, that we sit around and play the worst game of top trumps that anybody's ever played, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Laughter is something that we use very, very often within Addysg Man Club to get those guys to feel better. It can be anything from looking at a particular positive in life or focusing on a particular situation. So having a laugh and a joke, and something like tell us your best joke or do your best impression or what's a guilty pleasure song or something along those lines. When I left that room that night, having participated in all 5 of those questions, the feeling that I got was that I'd felt as though I'd grown 6 foot on top of the 6 foot that I already am. Addysg Man Club completely and utterly changed my life, and I'm very, very fortunate for having found it. We're just going to finish off now with another quick video of some of the other guys that have walked through the doors of Addysg Man Club and the way that it's benefited them.
Worries and anxieties a big part of my life. Started about 10 years ago. I didn't want to live anymore. I thought the world would be better off without me. I thought that maybe if I was to take my own life, I could be with my child. But I was very suicidal at the time.
As a child, it was getting bullied and not being able to say how I felt to people. To talk about the problems I went through as a child and everything that happened, I didn't want to.
My worries and anxieties started around the passing of my father in 2013. It affected me in my day-to-day life, it affected my job, it affected relationships. I didn't talk to my friends or family about my problems that were going on.
So the easiest thing for me was to not be here. It was a Sunday night, I think it was, and I knew I didn't want to be here, and I was planning that night to do something.
Thoughts going through my mind were how I'd be judged by people, you know, real bad thoughts about, you know, getting out of this life.
My worries and anxieties probably started a long time ago, but the most recent was last year. My cousin committed suicide. It was very hard to discuss my problems at that moment in time, as I couldn't even string a sentence together.
I felt very alone. I had a lot of people around me, I know a lot of people cared, but just something instinctively in me just wouldn't open up.
I never spoke about it with anyone. The problems have kept me in all my life.
There's a stigma attached to around how a man should appear and what he should say. There's an ideal view of a man, and I think people need to break the cycle of that and just not conform to that.
I know a lot of men that have struggled generally, especially in the UK. I think not enough men talk about the problems.
The first step towards helping myself was joining Addysg Club.
The only time I first spoke about my problems was when I first went to Addysg Club.
I first sought help through Addysg Club.
It's saved my life, really.
My name's Luke Campbell and I'm the founder of Addysg Club. I believe male mental health in our country has for a long time now been stigmatised. There's been out 3 stigmas: weakness, burden and embarrassment, and I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't want to speak. They feel weak to speak, they feel like they'll burden others, and with the lad culture we have with banter, they feel like they're embarrassed to give any vulnerability away. To any man out there watching this, it's not weak to talk, it's not weak to ask for help.
Steps that I've taken to resolve my issues. I've started talking a lot more to people. The importance of talking about how you feel is phenomenal. Talking's really opened me up to people, my family, my friends. It's turned my life around. I'm happier than I have been in my entire life.
No matter what, I talk about everything now. I won't keep anything in at all.
If I were going to give any advice, it's talk to whether it be your loved ones, professionals, your friends, and if you don't have any friends, reach out. You know, if you are willing to reach out, people are willing to help.
Getting guys in a room and opening up and giving people hope, giving people a lifeline, that's what Addysg Club's all about. My advice to any man out there is that you will get through this. At times you may think that there is no other way out, that relationship breakdown, that debt you're in, or whatever issues you're struggling with, that you can't get through that, but trust me, you can. I've dealt with enough people to know now that that cloud will pass. That roller coaster you're on where it just seems like you're going down, down, down will take a turn and you'll get back up. You just got to look up and know that the brighter times are coming, and I guarantee, reach out, it's okay to talk.
So just off the back of that video, there's 4 lads in that video that talk about making pretty serious plans to end their own days. All 4 of those lads, from walking through the doors of an Addysg Club, talking about what they're going through, being supported, turn their lives around to such a degree that they are all 4 been group facilitators for somewhere around the country, and one of them sits on our board of trustees. Again, if that doesn't show what talking can do for somebody, then I don't know what does. They walked through a door not able to see tomorrow for themselves, and now they offer hundreds upon hundreds of people that very same opportunity tomorrow. Spoke previously as well about Luke being a former rugby league player. This is what he looks like without his Instagram filters, by the way. Now that's somewhere where toxic masculinity is still quite prevalent, that whole man up culture and don't show any sort of weakness. For him to be coming from that sort of background where it might have a time and a place for the 80 minutes he spends on the pitch, but it doesn't throughout the rest of life. As I say, for him to be coming from that sort of background and sharing that sort of message around it being okay to talk can hopefully go a huge, huge way to helping challenge some of those stigmas and get more guys to open up about what they're going through. We know that that video uses what we now know to be dated language on suicide. That committed word is not something that should be associated with it anymore. That's knowledge we've given ourselves since the video was made. We hope that no offence has been caused, but as I'm sure you'll agree, the message that the video puts across is a very, very powerful one. Now, just before we do finish, we're really fortunate here at Addysg Club that we've been given a little recognition for the work that we do, and that we've won both the National Diversity Award and the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. Now, we're not putting that out there again to say, look at us, aren't we fantastic? We're putting that out there to, the only reason we'll ever accept an award is the fact that it will put us under the nose of somebody that will benefit from the work that we do. That National Diversity Award, for example, was broadcast live on ITV. And I now know of a guy that attends our session up in Liverpool who only found out about us because of that session that night. The National Diversity Award is a little bit different one for me, because that goes to recognise who I see as the true heroes of Andy's Man Club, who are those guys that not only do they step through the door for themselves every single Monday night, they hold it open for those ones that follow them, our volunteers, our facilitators. Not only do they make sure that those doors are open every single Monday night, they attend events, they invest so much of their time into this sort of organisation, and we're absolutely indebted to them for what they do. So the fact that they got recognition for me is a big one. This slide's ever so slightly different in as well, that, obviously we have a very male-centred focus through our presentation, as I'm sure you can understand, but we couldn't do what we do without the support of women. You can see just two of the women that are involved with Andy's Man Club there, in our general manager, Sabrina, and Andy's mum, Elaine, who you've obviously seen before. There's an old saying that rings very, very true as far as Andy's Man Club's concerned, that behind every strong man, there's a great woman. We have an amazing team of women that help us out here in the office as employees. We have an amazing team of volunteers out there who are women. All sorts of different women involve themselves with Andy's Man Club. We couldn't do what we do without their help. So thank you so much if you are one of those guys that's talked about us or shared information about Andy's Man Club. So thank you so much for your attention this morning. I'm going to come off screen share and take any questions that anybody might have in a minute or two. But before I do that, I'd like to ask something of you. And that would be to talk about Andy's Man Club. Tell people what we've talked about here this morning. All of those videos that you've seen today are available through our YouTube channel or social media platforms. Drop somebody a text, have a face-to-face conversation when you're in the pub with somebody tonight. However it might be that those conversations arrive, have them. Like, share or comment on one of our social media posts. If that lands on the right person's timeline, the impact of that can't be underestimated. So thanks again so much for your attention. As I say, I'll come off screen share and take any questions or comments that anybody might have. Should they want to put any across? I've first of all got Maggie.
Hi, I do a lot of work around cocaine, which is cocaine and alcohol related suicides. I just wondered if you'd come across much of this in speaking to the men that you have. Has this been a theme where, how do you deal with the substance issues that might come through these sessions?
Yeah, we do get guys that are dealing with issues around addiction and various different things like that, and different coping strategies, of which recreational drugs can often be something that we hear of quite a lot. I think the fact that the guys are coming through those doors in the first point to actually have those discussions and talk about those sort of situations that happen in their life is brilliant, because it shows that they have somewhere to be able to go now that isn't necessarily as clinical and as fantastic as the level of support that they get. They can maybe have a rung on the ladder before that. They can maybe have a situation whereby they're feeling a little bit, actually, do I need some support? They might be in a little bit of a transitional period between, I might still be quite enjoying this sort of side of my life, and how do I move away from it, knowing that it's been detrimental to, my physical health, my mental health, and all those different types of things. And the fact that they come through the doors and talk about that is brilliant. And I've seen guys that have gone full, 118, that they've walked through the doors saying, well, I'm spending X amount using this situation to then becoming volunteers for us and completely and utterly turning their life around. So there's no involvement in that world for them at all. And that's absolutely staggering to see. So yeah, it's something that we see. What we can do quite often as well is to signpost people towards levels of support as well. So if they are coming through the doors talking about a particular issue, while obviously as peer support we can't officially refer people, we can point them in the direction of support services that are out there that might support them with their specific issues a little bit clearer as well.
That's fantastic. That was the second question I was going to ask. So, but the work you're doing, I'm a massive supporter of that. I'm, despite my voice, I live in the Rhondda in South Wales, and I know we've got an Andy's down here, so I'm always signposting to there. Thank you so much for today. It's been brilliant.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your support. I've just noticed as well that Tamara's asked for me to highlight where the groups are in South Wales. So yeah, we do have one in the area of the Rhondda. We have one in Porthcawl. We have one in Abergavenny. And then obviously, if any of you are based a little bit northern than that, we have Wrexham as well. We are aware that obviously there's quite a lot of area that we're not covering within that area. there's work happening at this moment in time for us to be able to get into new areas in Wales next year, and hopefully in the new year we'll have some details about new clubs in those areas as well. So hopefully we can reach out and support more and more guys.
Who would be the people to contact if we wanted to support that?
That would be us in the office with the initial step, because as I say, with all the guys being volunteers, we take on an awful lot of that burden initially. So anything at all that you want to get in touch with us about, feel free to drop us an email to info@addysgclub.co.uk. We'll help out in any way that we can.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Got a question as well from Michelle Kurzweil. So I just noticed there was second Michelle then as well.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. It's an absolute pleasure, honestly. I'm so pleased that you've been able to join us this morning. This is something that's like really close to my heart, both like personally and, you know, professionally as an organisation. I work in the curriculum team in Adult Learning Wales. And one of my questions was really going to follow up from what you've just said about the, you know, coverage across Wales as well. And you know, whether there's any way at all that we can help as an adult learning organisation. You know, we've got that kind of outreach in communities, and we engage with, you know, anywhere in the region of like 6,000 to 10,000 learners a year, you know, which equates to a significant.
You guys are busy if you're doing that in a day, aren't you?
Yeah, but do you know what? Yeah, it feels like we're doing that in a day sometimes, Andrew, I tell you. But I'm just thinking a lot of our, like, you know, what we're about as well, because a lot of our provision, you know, we put on specifically to support people, and sometimes it's a byproduct of provision we put on to support people who are, you know, do have low mental health, etc. And I think I'm trying to say a lot of things here really, because I'm just really overwhelmed by this, and it's, you know, something, as I said, that's really close to my heart. It's if and how we could help as an organisation in one, I guess, you know, raising awareness. And I know we can do that via our social media channels. We can do that, you know, through messages to learners, etc. But I'd be really keen for us to work more closely together just to see how we can extend that reach and the messages. I mean, naturally, we're in Wales. So again, you know, whatever we could do to support, to, you know, extend the number of clubs, etc., and whether that's supporting with, you know, venues, etc. I just wondered as well, just on a personal level, how many of younger men towards that kind of 18 to early 20s age range actually you find walking through the doors as well?
Yeah, well, I'll answer the first part of your question initially. That any sort of level of support that you guys can give us is very, very gratefully received. We're quite happy to come out and, you know, if you have groups of learners that you feel would benefit from the presentation that we've just seen now, we can organise to do that again for as many different groups of people that you may feel would benefit from it. But again, you know, we can send you out an amount of our literature, you know, business cards and posters and various different things, so that obviously people have got the things to pick up for themselves. And social media posts and all those different types of things would be absolutely phenomenal for us. You touched on it, you know, I was going to sort of mention any sort of area that you might have that you may feel would be suitable for us to use as a venue. Obviously, but that venue for us just needs to be available between sort of 6:30 and 9 o'clock on a Monday evening. Be large enough to obviously for us to be able to capacitate sort of 30 to 40 guys every single week. While we might not get those guys through the doors initially, it just means that we have a base and somewhere that allows us to grow, and somewhere that obviously we can call home for a period of time. So yeah, anything in that regard. And then obviously if you have people that you feel might be benefiting as far as volunteering for us, you know, you might have some learners, you might have some colleagues, you might have some family members that you feel would be useful to us in that regard, that would be more than helpful as well. To answer the question in and around obviously the demographic of men that come along to an Addysg Club, we do see guys of a younger age come through the doors. One of our facilitators is a guy that's 19, and came through the door having obviously experienced some difficulty throughout his teenage years, who then got himself through the door and as I said, turned his life around to such a degree that he's now volunteering for us, all the way up to, you know, obviously with us not taking any details and various different things like that, you know, there might be somebody that's older, but I think I'm aware of a guy that comes along to an Addysg Club that's 92, and we have literally everything in between as well. And as I touched on within the presentation as well, they're coming from a different, you know, racial background, they come from a whole manner of different backgrounds as well. So there is every single walk of life walk through the doors of one of our sessions. So hopefully that's helpful for you.
Oh no, thank you so much, and we'll do our utmost. And I think a chat after at some point in the new year with, you know, ourselves and Tamara would be really helpful as well.
Definitely, definitely. Maggie's just asked another question: are there any plans to facilitate sessions to under 18s? Not currently, no, because obviously the situation as it is with male suicide at this moment in time and the challenges that I think the male population is showing, we're exceptionally busy with the work that we're doing. So at this moment in time, we don't. Within obviously working within under 18s, there are a number of challenges that face themselves, and we may have to look at changing the provision should we do that. In that, obviously, there's concerns around safeguarding and various different things that might obviously affect how the sessions run. Obviously, the confidentiality side of things would have to be dependent upon those sessions, and obviously, you're then looking at different levels of DBS and all sorts of different sorts of hurdles that present themselves. So at this moment in time, we don't have any plans to facilitate to under 18s. That said, our hope is that by challenging these stigmas now, getting men, especially that are the flag wavers and the role models to those people that are under 18 currently, if they're a little bit more open to speaking about their issues, then that can translate into obviously guys of a younger generation then feeling as though it's socially acceptable for them to do so as well. So while obviously the work that we're doing at this moment is focused purely on men, our hope is that we do get a trickle down as well, and it starts to positively affect some of the people that we hope that we know need help as well. No problem at all. So, right then, guys, if there's no other questions or anything of that nature, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. It's been a great little bit of time spent with you guys, and thank you so much for the opportunity. If there is somebody that's been here itching to ask a question but doesn't want to do so because of the stigmas that exist, we know they're still there. If you'd rather get back in touch with us through the email address or one of our social media platforms and reach out to us individually, then please feel free to do that. Just obviously mention that we've spoken to you today, or you might just want to provide us with some feedback to what you've seen. That would be amazing as well. So thank you so much, guys, and I hope that you all have a brilliant Christmas, New Year, and time off if that's something that you're not celebrating. So thank you so much, guys. Take care, and it's okay to talk.